Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lynn St. And I'm an attorney in Washington State at ELG Estate Planning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Town Hall Ask an Attorney. We have a very special guest today who is going to be talking about her experience serving as an executor of an estate. Her name is Reverend Janet Kraft. I have known Jan for a very long time, and I'm just so pleased that she's joining us today. She is an accomplished author. She is a reverend. Her life is dedicated to helping people really, manage things, and particularly end-of-life type situations, which I know it's not fun to talk about, but sometimes it's one of the most difficult things. So I'm really glad she's with us. Please feel free to ask any questions. You can type them in the chat box or post them on Facebook, and we'll make sure that we try our best to answer all the questions today. So thanks for joining. Jan, it's so good to have you here today.
Thank you, Lynn. We've been talking about doing this for a long time, Lynn and I, and so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to tell you about my experience being an executor. For me and my ministry, I do focus on end-of-life concerns, and mostly it's because there's so much possibility for pain and suffering at the end of life, and it has nothing to do with the death process itself, and everything to do with what happens in your life after you've died. So if you have taken the time to plan ahead of time, and writing down your affairs and everything that your executor is going to need to know, that makes their job infinitely easier. And if you haven't taken that time, they're going to go through a really challenging year and a half or more, trying to straighten out your affairs. So that's the purpose of this webinar this afternoon. Lynn and I are going to be in dialogue about a few things about this, but I want to tell you like 3 things that an executor is going to need to do. Now, you're going to need to think in terms of, are you going to be called to be an executor at some point? Are you going to have to settle someone's affairs? Chances are very good that you are. Or, someone's going to have to settle your affairs. And so I kind of want you to think with both hats today. But in terms of an executor, there's kind of 3 things you need to be aware of. First is the family dynamics. I am the executor of one of my relatives, and for privacy's sake, I'm going to call my relative Mr. and Mrs. Somebody. And so I am their executor, and I did it because they could not find anybody else to do it. And that's what I want you to think about. When you pass, someone's got to close out your life. They've got to deal with a lot of minutiae and administrative things. And I want you to think about who that person would be. And in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Somebody didn't have anyone else to do it. And after a year of saying, I won't do it, I'm sorry, I love you, but I won't do it. When they were close to the end of their lives, I said, I will do this for you. And I did it out of love and for no other reason. So I knew at the time I was stepping into a whirlwind of things. The second thing to think about is the family dynamics, because think about the executor's going to have to step into the family dynamics. And a lot of family dynamics are really challenging. They're really difficult. They're really ugly. And the executor has to get down and dirty, and they've got to deal with the family dynamics and who's going to want to take on that job, who's going to have the intelligence and the fortitude and the patience and the kindness to take on that job. So that's something else that you need to think about as well. And the third thing you need to think about is that they're going to need to bring a close to your life. So if you've kept anything secret, it won't be secret after your passing. They're going to have to get in and handle things for you. And that some people are ashamed of how many debts, what debts they carry, or how much money they make, or how they want to apportion their estate out in the will. And the executor's got to deal with all of that. So that's something else you got to think about, is who can do that. So, hey, Lynn, there is one question I want to ask you. I thought I heard that an heir, somebody who is an heir in the will, cannot serve as executor. Is that true?
No, actually, an heir is usually defined as someone who is related to the person who prepared the will. So if Mr. Somebody has a will prepared, he is what's called the testator, last will and testament, and his heirs at law, so his heirs are going to be defined by statute. I don't want to get too legal, but basically that's who is his spouse, and if he has kids, who are his kids, and those are his heirs at law. And oftentimes it'll be the spouse or one of the children who will serve. So no, in fact, it's just the opposite. Of course, an heir can serve. The only disqualification usually is if they're a felon, then they can't serve.
Oh, okay. Isn't there some kind of conflict of interest, though, if an heir is an executor, but they're also inheriting money in the will? Does that set up a conflict of interest?
No, actually, they have the most vested interest possible to, administer the estate. So there is not a conflict of interest, assuming that they carry out their duties according to the fiduciary standard, which is that they must put the interest of the estate first. So, for example, if the daughter is the executrix of the will, she can't say, okay, it's all mine, if the will said everything gets divided among my 4 children. So her duty is to the estate, to the person who died. So there is not any kind of conflict of interest. But yeah, the person who's the executor, the personal representative, needs to do their job correctly.
Okay, yeah. So that still takes a certain amount of energy and willingness to work with everybody. And
energy, willingness, and capability.
Capability
is like, they have to be willing, but they have to be capable. And so we tell folks that, don't appoint somebody who basically is not going to be able to carry out the job.
Right. There's a lot of administrative minutia that you have to do, creating an inventory and filing this document and compiling this and talking to the creditors and talking to the, a lot of different people working with the funeral home, those kind of things. And some people just don't have either the mental ability or the patience or the inclination to do that. So that's another thing in thinking about who's your executor should be. I think you need someone who can do that, actually.
You need somebody who's really capable. I'm just going to jump in and answer that question that I see here is, if I have a living trust, do I still need a will? Yes, you do. Anybody that has, it doesn't matter if it's the executor under a will or a successor trustee under a revocable living trust, there has to be somebody who is doing this job. We're talking right now about a will, but if you do have a revocable living trust, you also do need a will. It's usually called a pour-over will, and oftentimes with a revocable living trust, you need not just the person handling the will, but the person handling the trust. Sometimes it's actually more complicated. So just want to answer that question. If you have a trust, you need a will as well.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks. So one of the first things that happened for me as executor of Mr. Somebody's will is once he passed, the first thing I'd say about an executor is that they have to calm the heirs, calm the family, because when somebody dies, I say, as a minister, I see this, weddings and funerals bring out the best and the worst in people. And when somebody dies, especially if you stand to inherit, or if it's a parent, there's a lot of fear. Fear just like comes to the surface, and greed and jealousy and all that bubbles up. And, it resides in all of us, fear and jealousy and greed, and that resides in all of us. But some of us visit those states, and some people live in those states, if you follow what I'm saying. So oftentimes when someone dies, the heirs or the family might run to the house where the deceased lived, if the deceased died in the hospital, and then start taking things. There's a fear of, oh gosh, dad's gone now, so I want the big screen TV, and I want this and this and this, before somebody else gets there and gets it. And so that is one of the things that can, and I'm sure often does happen. and particularly if the family dynamic is challenging, and many families, in my experience, have immensely challenging dynamics. There's always at least one person in the family that's the black sheep, and sometimes more than that, or sometimes the family fights amongst themselves, which is the case that I was dealing with. And so they freak out, I mean, in common parlance. And so that the job of the executor is to calm them down. In my situation, I'm 500 miles from where Mr. and Mrs. Somebody lived. And so I was tipped off within hours of Mr. Somebody's death. I was tipped off that there was this massive, let's take everything we can out of the house situation. And I had to put a call in and get on speakerphone and settle them down. And I really just had to say, you know, every single person in the room is an heir, is going to be inheriting in the will. And I know that because I worked with Mr. and Mrs. Somebody to get their will together. So everybody, you're taken care of. Don't worry. Don't freak out. You can't, by law, take things out of the house because now everything in the house belongs to the estate. And it's in the will that the estate is to be sold and divided equally among the heirs. So I said, you cannot walk out with the big screen TV. It has to stay put, but you're okay. And I really jumped into minister mode to express my condolences and really feel for them, because I did. I really, really did. My heart broke for them because they loved their dad and their whatever relationship Mr. Somebody was to them, and now he's dead and emotions are raw. So anyway, Lynn, I don't know if what I said actually was correct. But it did calm things down. I did put water on the fire. But when I said that the stuff now belongs to the estate, it doesn't belong to them, and they can't take things out of the estate. Was that true? Was that a true statement?
Yes, that was correct. And you know, everybody should have an executor as trained and compassionate as you, Jan. That would make things easier, because oftentimes that doesn't exist and people just go in and try to raid the house. And all I can suggest is, try to calm people down, let people know that, ultimately whatever stuff there is will be distributed according to the wishes of your loved one. Oftentimes there's something called a personal property list that says, oh, Jimmy gets the big screen TV, and, Susie gets the car, and on, or the grandkids get this and that, so that it will go according to the decedent's wishes. But oftentimes, yeah, you're right, it's just kind of a free-for-all, and especially if the family's dysfunctional, and it makes it that much harder.
It does. It
does.
really does.
Yeah.
And that was a test, because I told you that I loved Mr. and Mrs. Somebody very, very much. And and from an executive point of view, it was only within 2 hours of me hearing of his death that I had to jump in and deal with this crisis. So that's one of the things else to think about when you're thinking about who should your executor be, is can they handle these kind of situations? And I have to say, I'm about 6 months in to my assignment as executor, and this kind of situation has come up literally more times than I can count. So it's not a one and done kind of deal. Your executor throughout the entire process will be handling these kind of things. So that's that.
Now, there is a Facebook question, is probate a concern only for those with large estates? I'll go ahead and let you answer that one, Jan.
Oh my God, no. And Lynn, you'll have to talk about the probate thing, but here's the thing, please understand this. And I'm one of these people who live by voluntary simplicity in all respects, whether I want to or not. Sometimes it's involuntary simplicity. I don't have much at all, and most of the people I know, I hang in my inner circle, don't have much at all in terms of money and property and assets. And still, you've spent a lifetime amassing a life of data and information and credit cards and debts and animals that have to be taken care of and all like that. And that has to be handled. Probate is for your property, so you may not have a house, but you've got stuff you've got clothes, you've got possessions, you've got a bank account. It may not be much in there, but you've got it. Something's got to happen with that. And if nobody is on your bank account, it could go to the state if there's no activity, and you know, you don't have a payable on death and you don't have a joint owner. So you have stuff. You have stuff that has to be handled. It doesn't have to be a lot of, you know, big money stuff, any stuff, little stuff. And if you don't think you have stuff, remember about the last time you moved. You know how much stuff you have when you move, and you're going, oh my God, I didn't think I had this much stuff. Oh yeah, you do. And so much more and so much more and so much more. So yes, you do. I mean, that's my passionate answer. Lynn, do you agree with me?
Well, I agree with you from the legal perspective. Actually, a larger estate oftentimes is simpler, right? Because people aren't fighting over the stuff as much as they are, you know, do I get my share of this large bank account, or the proceeds from the sale of this house, or this or that. But you know, there is, and so maybe there might be, I don't know, maybe there's a professional who is hired as the executor if you've got a large estate. But the point of it is that when people pass away, some work is going to need to be done, even if it's just to rehome the pets. Somebody has to do that. Make notice to the state of the death, divvy up what the stuff, personal property is, maybe gather some bank accounts or not. There does need, I call it an estate administration, because it may be a probate, it may be a trust administration. The generic term I use is there's an estate administration that has to be done, and it could be simple or it could be difficult. I do have to say, especially as an estate planning lawyer, that if you have a good plan in place, good estate plan, you've gone through a lot of these issues, we try to make it as easy as possible, but not everybody takes the time, invests, and puts into place a good estate plan to make things easier for whomever has the job that you're talking about, Jan.
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know, that falls to the executor. If you don't have somebody that you've designated, it falls to the executor to figure that out. Mr. and Mrs. Somebody had two really big issues before they passed that they could not settle. And they spent years trying to settle these issues as to what happens. And they couldn't figure it out. And then they passed. And because I am the executor, that responsibility for figuring out those two issues that they couldn't figure out for years, that passed to me. And there's nobody else to do it. It fell to me. I had to do it. One of them was what to do with 6 geriatric dogs. So can you imagine how hard it is to place one dog? Maybe a puppy might be easier, but 6 geriatric dogs had to find a home because Mr. Somebody was the last one. Mrs. Somebody passed earlier. And these dogs have to be fed. They have to be cared for. And that responsibility fell to me. That was fun. And another one was what to do with a dependent adult who was living on their property, who had been there for years. That person had to find a home, and because he had some challenges, that fell to me. I mean, the disposal of the property fell to me, and so that was something that I had to figure out. So I say, no decision is a decision. When you choose not to make a decision, or you say, I can't make a decision, folks, that's a decision. And that has to be passed along to somebody. And so when you look at your whole property and your state, don't think just in terms of what's in my bank account, what are my assets, but think about these kind of personal things of what, you know, I'm sure that you have some tricky issues. Don't leave somebody else to try and figure out these tricky issues. You know, make the decisions yourself and pass that along, be that as it may. So Lynn, should I talk about fighting with the attorney?
So tell me about your experience with the attorney.
Yeah, okay. I made an assumption, Lynn. I want you to weigh in on this. You and I've discussed it separately, but you know, I helped Mr. and Mrs. Somebody find an attorney, and I did get a referral from someone else when they put their wills together. And so we worked with that attorney, and all was fine and well, and etc. And then when Mr. Somebody is the last one to die, when he died, I just went back to the attorney who prepared the wills. I thought, he knows our situation. It will be okay. It'll be okay. And so I hired him to do the probate. I regret that decision now in that it's not a good personality mix for him and for me. And his way of doing things are a little challenging for me. And believe me when I tell you, I just am not their most fun client. There was a conversation between me and the attorney early on when things just weren't happening as quickly as I thought they should, or that I wanted them to. And I thought I had a lot more power, if you will, although I'm not into power, but a lot more responsibility to do things as executor than what I actually ended up having, or, was told I had. And so in this conversation, I kind of ticked off the attorney, and he had a very nice and kind and respectful way of saying, "Jan, cool your jets," and I had to laugh really, because even COVID, there's some slowdown, of course, due to COVID, but it just took forever to get the estate filed with the court, and then the court to do this, and then I couldn't pay the bills, and the bills were 3 months delinquent, and I wanted to pay the bills. I wanted to open the bank account. I was told, no, you can't pay the bills. You cannot open the bank account. I'll do this. And so it's not been an easy working relationship with me and the attorney. We've kind of I can't say we butted heads, but it's been more of a challenging experience for me as executive than I would like. And I don't think it had to be this way. Lynn, can you jump in there?
Yeah. Whenever somebody is looking to work with a professional, I think what's really important is that they have trust in the professional, that they can see their competency, that the professional can communicate with them in a way that fits. And so, preparing the estate plan would have been the first place for you to maybe say, does this work or does this not work? But it wasn't your estate plan. It was, Mr. and Mrs. somebody's. But at that point, there could have been an indication whether or not that this person was responsive and you felt really good about their skill level. Now, most people do go back to the drafting attorney to handle the probate. There's no requirement that occur, but most people have already established a relationship. They've drafted the estate planning, so it makes sense. But at that point, at the decision point, Jen, you could have said, well, how do you normally work? Do you respond within 24 hours? How soon until this is going to be filed with the court? What is your depth of team, of staff here? Basically you're saying, what are your standards? And just like, with any professional, lawyers, it just, runs the gamut about what they find acceptable, what you find acceptable. And so I think it is important that you find somebody that is a good fit for you. And it sounded to me like perhaps this wasn't a good fit. And if it's not a good fit with the lawyer you're working with, that's not only going to increase the angst that you're dealing with, right? But it's also, it costs more in legal fees.
I know.
There's just more back and forth. And if there's a clear path and this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, here's your job, call us if you have this, it's actually going to keep the legal fees down. So I just want to encourage anybody, if they're saying, oh, I should go back to the lawyer that drafted it, well, you should maybe talk with them. But if you're not comfortable with that attorney, then find an attorney and, look at their Google, their reviews, talk to people, get information, because just like we do with any professional, with a doctor or whatever, you're going to want to go to the one that you feel best, working with. So I'm sorry that it has not been that easy for you. What state is this probate occurring in?
The probate is occurring in Missouri.
Okay. All right.
And I live in a different state.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And if it had been Washington, man, you would have been, I want you as my attorney. Yeah. So my question is, could I or should I call before we even started and the probate and before I said, go do it. Could I have like got on the phone with him and said, I have some questions for you, and this is my question, which is what you were saying. How do you work? How often can I expect a response from you? How long does this take? Etc. Because you're right, it's been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I know, because I've worked in this business, every back and forth, every phone call, every email, tallies up how the estate, we're running up a lot of legal bills. And just in me as the executor trying to figure out what's our next step. Why isn't this happening? Why isn't the court, I've been surprised at how many times our cases had to go in front of the court. It said in the will that the house was to be sold. I think that once, the court the probate court, when you open the file, says, okay, so the will is valid. So I thought, okay, so that's it. We don't need to do anything more until we meet at the end. Oh, no. We had to go back to get permission from the court to sell the house, even though the will said sell the house. It's like, okay, so now the court appearance to sell the house. And then—
So Jan, you're in a jurisdiction which sounds to me like it's what we call an intervention jurisdiction. In Washington State, we go to the courthouse one time and open up the probate, and there on out, there is no court permission required for any of our activities. And at the very end, we simply file a declaration of completion. It's done. So it depends, in the state that you're in, maybe the estate planning should have been different to make things easier. I can't say. I know in Washington, it would not be as complicated or as costly as what you're going through. So, every state has a different set of laws. So whatever state you're in, you want to make sure that you're dealing with an attorney, an estate planning attorney, that is going to do your estate plan and going to explain, and what does this mean upon my passing? What's going to happen? And they should be able to explain that to you. That's not a tough question. So, sorry again.
Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate that. One of the things I alluded to that the executor has to do is take an inventory of the assets of the deceased. That was a challenge, but given that I live 500 miles away, and given we're in a pandemic, and the court had to have this inventory right away, like within the first 30 days or something. That was a super challenge. And given that Mr. and Mrs. somebody, as many people, have a lot of stuff, lots and lots of stuff.
Did you bring in like an estate planning company? There are ways that you can deal with that. You can hire an estate planning company to come in. They usually take a commission, maybe even 40%, but they do a lot of that work for you, and then they sell it.
They sell it?
Yeah, that's how they make their money, is they look at all the stuff. For example, my mom had a lot of stuff too, right? We brought in the estate planning company, and all of those years and years of purchasing things came out to being like $10,000 at an estate sale, of which they took 40%. But yeah.
I did check once I made the inventory, and we had to do that by FaceTime. I had someone on the ground who was helping me, and she would FaceTime with me, turn the camera around, and she says, okay, here's the bedroom, and here's what's in the bedroom, and here's what's, so I'm writing down as we're FaceTiming. That was real fun. But I did go to the auctioneer, and the auctioneer came out and took a look at the stuff in less than 5 minutes, really. And they said, okay, no, we can't do anything.
It has to have sufficient value to interest a business. So, and depending on where you're at, in Spokane, for example, we have people who, even with a low value, will come in and do that work. It depends on the resources that are available. So,
and in small town Midwest, I didn't find a lot of things, but maybe that's my error as an executor. Maybe I should have looked harder or did a little more research.
No. The lawyer is supposed to give you those resources.
Oh.
The lawyer is your resource to say, contact this estate planning company or do that.
Okay, that didn't happen. All right. So there we have it. I had this other thing, right now I'm in the middle of all this, and so we're waiting to sell the property, and again, time drags on. But I wrote about bringing a close to Mr. and Mrs. somebody's life. Here's one thing, and I'm going to talk just briefly about my company, Leaving Lightly. When Mrs. Somebody approached me early on about we need to get our affairs together, and that's after a year of me preaching the gospel of get your affairs in order to her. And we went and we did the attorney and got the wills together. They both, Mr. and Mrs. Somebody at this point, were very ill, very, very ill. And we came back from the attorney and office, and I said, okay, and I pulled out the Leaving Lightly book, which is a book to write down your assets, to write down everything that your executor or whoever has to clean you up would need to know. So I sat down with the Leaving Lightly book and I say, okay, let's get to it. We'll just start in on it. We got a couple of hours into it, and she got so ill, just the stress of it, she got so ill that I thought I was going to give her a stroke. So we stopped. And I made a mental note, okay, Jan, give it 4 weeks, just let her settle down, and then get back to it. Well, she died before we could get back to it. So what we were able to write down in the 2 hours that we had was all I had to go on. Now, I took care of the administrative stuff for Mr. Somebody after her death, because she handled all of the administrative things. And in every family and every couplehood, usually there's one spouse who handles all the administrative things and the other one is clueless. So when Mrs. Somebody, who took care of all the administration, died, Mr. Somebody didn't even know how much money he had in the bank. He didn't know where the titles to the cars were. He did not know how to write a check. So I had to go through the bank statements with him and deal with the bank with him, and there was a lot of money laying around the house we had to gather up and deposit into the bank, etc. So I'm doing all of that administrative stuff for him. One thing is that calling places, they won't talk to you. I had to always be in his presence when I was calling, say, the pension people or the life insurance people, and he had to give permission for me to talk to them, and that got a little crazy when I went back to my home and we were 500 miles away and we had to do this through conference call. That was a little nuts. But one of the things, Mrs. Somebody had been clear to me about his pension and his life insurance, Mr. Somebody's. So I did have all that recorded. And she mentioned in passing, oh, I've got a couple of policies, I think, or one policy. I've got a life insurance policy too. It's a small, I think she said two. I've got a couple of life insurance policies. They're small, myself. I didn't ask her at the time. My biggest regret is that I didn't say, oh, tell me about them. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. And then she got really, really sick and she was in ICU for a week. And I'm in touch with Mrs. Somebody while she's in ICU and I'm 500 miles away. But I'm telling you, it's not a good thing for somebody to be in ICU and they're dying. And I'm not going to say, oh, by the way, you didn't tell me where your life insurance policies were. Can you just tell me that before you die? Can't do that when somebody's in ICU. And I'm sitting here and I know she's dying and I know I don't know this information and I know Mr. Somebody does not know this information and nor does anyone else. And it's like, okay, well, this is going to be very hard, but I've missed my window of opportunity. So she dies. I don't know that where the life insurance is. I go back, a few weeks later, we're trying to pull together now the things that I don't know. And that's the main one, is finding her life insurance. We went on, what's those scattered, those clue things, whatever game it is where you find a clue. So it took me 3 days to find her life insurance policy. And I turned every piece of paper, to try and find it. Finally, it was the last thing I had on my list of hot leads. It was the coldest lead I had. And it was just an advertisement from a newspaper cut out about a life insurance company I'd never heard of. But I had been over her check records over and over and over. And in the check register, I had seen this name pop up once, maybe twice. So I said, all right, I'll look for it. And that's where it turned out to be. It turned out to be, I think, two policies totaling $10,000. And $10,000 is not a lot of money to a lot of people. But Lynn, when you live hand to mouth, $10,000 is a lot of money. And the fact is that if we hadn't searched and found that, not only all the money that she'd been paying into this life insurance policy all these years, but the money paying out, that $10,000 is not, the heirs would never have seen it, never have known about it. And the state would have ended up with that $10,000 after a period of years as unclaimed money, right? So it took me 3 days to find that. And the point of the story is that of the things that we wrote down on the Leaving Lightly notebook, of where to find this, where are the bank accounts, what credit cards do you have, what's your account numbers, what, et cetera, insurance, what's your insurance, who's your doctors, et cetera. We got all that. The stuff we had written down, we were good, not a problem for me, I handled it. The stuff I had to figure out on my own, I had to become a detective and try and figure it out on my own. And that's the hardest, to be a detective and try and find out what a person's life is like. So, so Lynn, can we put in a plug for Leaving Lightly?
Yes, and can you tell us about Leaving Lightly? See, whenever we as estate planning lawyers meet with clients, we go over all of those things and say, you've got to write down your life insurance, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. But I love your approach as well, Jan, because I've seen your Leaving Lightly book. You know, it is great because it goes into that plus a lot more. So if somebody were interested in saying, yeah, I want to get my affairs in order, or maybe I want to make sure my parents or somebody has their affairs in order, at least write down the stuff where life policies is. And I think there is a national website you can go to. You know, you can Google lost insurance policies, but that's for a different time. But not to take away, it's really important to document and to put things in writing, so whomever has to do the work that you're doing doesn't have such a hard job, doesn't have to be Sherlock Holmes. So how do people get in touch with you or your Leaving Lightly book? How do you make that available for folks, Jan?
Well, first thing I'd recommend is going to the Leaving Lightly website, which is very simple, leavinglightly.com. So in there, it has 2 of the products. I now have 3, actually, that will help people understand what it is that they need. You're right. I know estate planning attorneys do a very comprehensive job of having people write down their personal things as it relates to anything legal or that they would need to know. But there are personal things that people don't think about. For one thing, like I had 2 cats. They're geriatric cats, but I live, you know, I mean, I'm single. I don't have, and I don't, you know, when I say I predeceased my cats, what's going to happen to the cats? And who's going to take care of them? And who's their vet? And what do I feed them? And are there any health issues? So that was it. And as I said, I had to find home for 6 geriatric dogs. So that's always something to take a look at. Who is notified? When I first moved to Seattle, and you'll appreciate this, I was working, was working with you. But it occurred to me one night, if I, standing on the street corner of downtown Seattle, if I get hit by a bus, you know, I knew the person cleaning me up was my sister back in Kansas City, and she didn't know the first thing about my life, really. And she knew I had a friend named Dorothy. Even my closest friend at the time was a woman named Dorothy. Good luck finding a woman named Dorothy in Seattle. You know, Dorothy lived in Kirkland anyway, but they didn't know who to contact. I mean, and they knew I worked in a law firm downtown Seattle. Good luck finding the law firm where I worked in downtown Seattle, right? So finding out who to contact, what's their phone numbers, letting people know these kind of things. So the personal things about your life, who do you want your bank accounts to go to? What happens to your car? Those kind of, where, you know, how many bank accounts do you have? Do you have any student loans? What are your debts? What assets do you have? What insurance do you have? Etc. So all of those things are personal things that need to be taken a thought of. Also, what do you want to have to do with your body? Once you're done with the body, what do you want to have happen to it? And making sure that somebody's legally empowered to follow your wishes without that. And having your voice and your mannerisms recorded is a real important thing for
I was hoping you were going to bring that up, not just the business aspects of everything, but, you know, I mean, we all have our phones now and we record videos and this and that. But it seems to me, I know my parents have both passed, and I love it when I have, you know, I can hear their voice or see their image. So tell me a little bit more about, are there services that, you know, where I would, you know, if I had a terminal disease, I would love to be able to convey information so that it's not lost. I would want to be able to, you know, in some way memorialize some of what I've learned, so it's there for, you know, my loved ones who survived me. What can people do about that?
In fact, Lynn, I do want to talk to you separately about that because I want to do one for you. Okay. I want to do a leaving lightly thing for you. You know, this is what I would tell people. Yes, there are services out there. There's legacy video services, you know, just Google legacy videos. And there's all kinds of professional videographers who will interview you and do a professional video, well lit and good audio, etc. And you can talk to them. Definitely they're out there. That's easy to find. But if you don't want to go through all of that, just take the phone. You know, I mean, your iPhone's got really great video and audio capabilities, and with each, you know, new generation, it's even better and better. Just do a recording, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, you know, record yourself, have your housemate or your spouse, you know, record you. In my Leaving Lightly materials, I've got about, I don't know, 50 questions that for you to think about of your life from the whole spectrum, from childhood through your retirement years and what you've learned as an older person, and all that. And it is comforting once you've passed, your loved ones have passed, to be able to play a video of them speaking and you hear their voice, and especially people have these funny accents, you know. So you hear that very particular accent that they have, that very particular voice that they have, and the mannerisms that they have. It just brings them alive in a way that nothing else can, like photographs can't bring them alive that way. So if nothing else, use your iPhone to record yourself and talk. You know, it doesn't matter what you say, as long as your heirs can just hear you and see you, that it will mean so much. And Lynn, now you are not yet a grandmother, but you will be soon. So thinking about your future grandchildren and their children, you know, if you talk about, and you've got so much about your journey in the time that I've known you, that you've had an incredible journey personally and professionally. And so just to record that for them, you will acquaint your future grandchildren with who you are and what life was like back in 2020. You know, it'll be probably 2080 by the time they're looking at it. And they might look at you and go, oh my God, look at that hairstyle. Isn't that weird? You know, oh, this was the time when they actually had cars on the road. Can you believe that? You know, it will be a historical, you know, thing for future generations as well. So, so there's no reason in today's technological world, when you've got iPhones and such at your fingertips, there is no excuse for not doing it, really. And I just wish with all my heart I could convey upon everyone how much your loved ones are going to miss you when you're gone, how much they love you now, and how much they'll miss you when you're gone. And if you can leave a little part of you for them to enjoy long after you've dropped the physical body, that's the best gift you could ever give them, really and truly.
Well, thank you, Jan, for that. I mean, I think that that's a really, really powerful message. And if people just take away one thing, it's like, do something on your phone today and record it. There's a few questions that we have from Facebook that are kind of legal questions about what happens to a person's bank accounts if they die without a will. They're going to go to the estate and they're going to have to be managed. I said estate, not the state. If you've got a trust, and if you have nothing in your trust, if it's empty, the trust is not going to serve any purpose. So I really want to, you know, encourage people that, you know, these are great questions, and I'm so glad that you're, you know, taking the time to think about, you know, what is not necessarily the easiest thing to think about. Jan, you've made it so great today that people can really follow with what it might be like to administer a estate, or what can a person do so that, you know, on their passing, it's not such a big job like the one you have, you know, to do what has to be done. So all I can say is, you know, information is great. Information is on the internet, you know, it's free. But it is the implementation and execution of that knowledge that is really where it's tough. This is not the, you know, something that people can do on their own. So I do encourage you to reach out to an estate planning lawyer to, you know, make sure that you feel good about the plan that you have, make sure that the plan that you have is going to work. upon, your passing, or if you have other family members, parents, or kids, it's something that we talk about it. I actually call it like a Thanksgiving conversation. Let's talk about what would happen if somebody dies. Anyway, that's me, but
I like a true estate attorney, Lynn.
yeah, I know. But everybody, please go to Jan's site, leavinglightly.com. Is that right, Jan?
Leavinglightly.com.
And that's something that you can do, information you can fill out on your own, and that will get you, that much further prepared, or, down the road in terms of, putting a plan into place. But I do encourage everybody, to reach out and get that kind of, expert help that they really need. So, well, Jan, thank you so much. It was fun talking with you.
My pleasure. Just totally my pleasure, Lynn. We'll have to do more of these in the future.
I would love it. I would love it. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us.